This is a review for the final examination to be held Thursday, April 30th. I will send it to you that morning, and I shall ask that you get it back to me by the end of that day. If we were in class, you would have 2.5 hours for this. I doubt if you will be wanting to write that long, but take whatever time you wish. You must do it by memory. What I will require, and I'll remind you of this when I send you the test, is that you that you write on the test your promise, your commitment that you will neither give nor receive any information for the test while you are taking it, that you will do it by yourself without any outside help, whether it's a person or information source, a written information source. So, in approaching the final exam, the way that I recommend you study for this, and I will recommend that you look at this final exam review on Wednesday after you have taken the final unit exam on Tuesday. That would be on Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I would recommend that you devote several hours to reviewing for this final exam. You, of course, can do it on Thursday, though you will have the exam by that time, but you may do it without looking at the exam or starting to write on it. But you will see the exact questions here that you have for the exam, and so you will probably not feel like doing it Tuesday night of next week. I'm getting this done here on Monday, the 20th, but probably Wednesday and or Thursday, it will be good for you to spend several hours working on this review. So that's the time frame that I would recommend to you. This will be an exam that, while it's usually all handwritten in pen or pencil, you will be typing it, so your fingers will not wear out probably quite as much as they would if you were writing it longhand, which you would be doing in class. The first thing I would recommend that you do with this review, do when you get to the exam, is write all of the names of all of the religions up at the top of the final exam sheet, which will look a lot like this. Or write them anywhere you want to. It doesn't have to be on the exam, certainly. You can just handwrite it, but it must be not brought to the test, but written at the time that you have opened the test without any prompting. I recommend that you write all of the religions. Confucianism and Taoism will count together as one religion, whether you cite elements from one of those or the other. I recommend that you write these down because by the time you have finished these 5 questions, 4 of which are required, but I will recommend that you do all 5, I think your mind could very well be a bit muddled from all that I'm going to ask you to do on this exam. So write the names of those religions ahead of time. Anything else you want to add to that you think that you might forget. Next thing. What I've already alluded to is that you're required to answer 4 of the 5 questions each of them in a half-page essay. I'm not particular about it having to be a half page, but that's about the amount of material, if you were writing it longhand, that I would think that you would need to include, and it would be rather compact and compressed if you did that. In other words, I'm going to be asking you to write quite a bit on each one of the 5 questions. You have 4 items and 5 items. 4 are required for you to make 100. 5 are given here for you to have 1 question. If you answer all 5, the possibility of extra credit on 1 of the questions. Each of the 4 required, you will have 25, will count 25% of the exam. The extra credit one will count a potential of 10 points of extra credit. Now there is in fact there are in fact students that score over 100 on this exam. As difficult as it is and as comprehensive as it is every semester. So you can be one of those if you prepare yourself well enough. That is all to say that each of the 4, well, let me mention another thing here. There is nothing lost, no risk to you from answering all 5 questions. If you answer all 4 will count 25% apiece. Let's say you answer all 5 though, and you get 25 points out of 4 of them, and you only get 15 or 20 points out of the 15 or 20 out of the 25 possible out of a 5th question. Well, what I will do on that is I will take your 4 best question, the answers of your 4 best questions, and you will get the credit on them. And then the 1 question that I find that you answer the least well, however amount that is, I will count that. If you've answered 5 questions, I will count that one as your extra credit question, because what you miss on that will not count for you, but you will still get credit for all you answer correctly on that. So if you answer, let's say, 5 of, you get 5 out of the 25 points correctly on that worst question, then 5/25 is 20%. So that means that you would get extra credit of 2 points on your exam for that question. If you answered 10 of the 25 points correctly on the extra credit question, that would give you 4 points of extra credit added to your other 4 questions that you answered best. So I hope that's clear to you. Feel free to email me if you have any question on that little calculation matter. The next thing to address is, before we actually come to the questions, is probably to tell you what these questions consist of generally. These questions will consist generally of your answering, and please understand this in its most comprehensive way. This is a comprehensive exam, so every question will require, as part of the credit, part of the 25 points, that you answer information from every religion, not just one, that you might know best. It is a common question of students. Does this mean that we have to answer all these questions about all religions or just about one? Well, the answer to that is you have to answer it about all of them. This is a long, big test. Maybe the hardest essay test that you have ever had. Now let's talk about the issue that it's an essay test, because that is true, but there's more to it than that might help you write this test. I recommend that you give me complete sentences. That's why it's called an essay test. Complete sentences for your answers. However, I recommend also that you feel free to use bullets or numbered items for putting down the items that you are going to include in your essay. So, under question 1, if you want, for the sake of your memory, to put down the ultimate entity of Hinduism, and then the ultimate entity of Buddhism, and then Taoism and or Confucianism or Shinto and so forth, before you write the sentences, that's fine. You can do that on a separate piece of paper, or you can do it right on the test, and I'll be happy to see it. But please do not leave the question with answers only by means of bullets or numbers. That is not sufficiently clear for me to know whether you understand what the answer, the question that I am asking you to answer. So be sure to answer with sentences in the form of an essay, and it can be more than one paragraph essay if you wish, or just one paragraph, either way. And feel free to use bullets as you wish as well. Now I believe it's time to go to the questions themselves. You may notice that there are 3 pages that we're going to go through. And the main point that I'm going to try to make for you on each one of these questions is how many things you need to answer from each question. Come to think of it, there is one other thing that I want to tell you in a general way about the general framework of the test. And that is that if you take 25 points and you note that you have 7 religions to comment on, then each of those religions is going to end up counting approximately 3.5 points on each one of the questions. 3.5 points. Now I'm going to divide that up a little bit more. On each of the questions, with the exception mainly of question 2, and I'll tell you about that when we get to it. On each of the questions, for each of the religions, you're going to need to, that's going to count 3.5 points, remember, you're going to have to answer about 3 things for each religion. So 3 things on each religion are going to count together 3.5 points. Now, if you divide 3.5 points by 3 things that you're going to have to answer for each religion, that means that each item that you need to answer for each religion is going to add up to about 1 1/6. So every answer that you give me is going to be counting about 1 1/6. And as you may realize, by the time you have answers that only count 1 1/6 each, that means that there's a whole lot of answers that you're going to be giving me. Now I believe that it's about time for us to start into the actual questions. Number one, every religion has, and so expect to see about 3 items, with the exception of question 2, 3 items that you're going to need to answer for each religion in this question. And I will point out what those 3 items are. Every religion has an ultimate entity, whether God, spirit, or ultimate reality, because they categorize under all those 3 categories depending on the religion. And by the way, I will be telling you no answers on this review. You are welcome, before you take the test, to consult, as I would encourage you to do in class, consult anyone else in the class, but from here on out, I will not be giving you any answers for the test, though you are welcome, before you start the final exam, to consult any of the class notes that you now have in video, plus the ones before we stopped meeting. You can consult any of those to get these answers that you wish. And I will note with you down below that you'll find A, B, C through F, and these are the page numbers in Negocian's text at which you will find the answers to each one of these questions. I don't really recommend that you read all these pages, but somewhere in those pages is where you will find every answer that you need for this for the particular question in the final exam. So let's get back into question number 1. Every religion has an ultimate entity, whether God, spirit, or ultimate reality. Ultimate entity is my category for that you may recall I have used as we have gone along in the course for the main phenomenon that the religion considers to be ultimate. So here we go. Here starts the 3 questions that you need to answer for each religion. The first one is, identify the entity by the appropriate term and explain it in 2 respects: its similarity to another religion's corresponding entity and its fundamental character, personal/impersonal, eternal or not, present in some things or all things. Now that is one big terrible sentence, and I guess I should apologize for that, but let me break it down for you. And you might do well, of course, to print out a copy of this review for you to mark up as we go along. First of all, identify the entity by the appropriate term and explain it in 2 respects. Let me back up. Identify the entity by the appropriate term. Well, let me give you a clue here on what the appropriate term is without actually giving you an answer. In Islam, the ultimate entity, which is a god, or who is a god, is not called by Islam God. That entity, he it is, goes by another term for them. In Judaism, they have an ultimate entity called God also. But the personal name of that entity is not God. You need to give me that personal name. Similarly with Christianity. So, identify the entity that's the ultimate entity by the appropriate term. That's number one. Now, the second thing to do is explain that entity in two respects. Its similarity to another religion's corresponding entity, and its fundamental character. So here I am asking you to connect the ultimate entity of Hinduism with the ultimate entity of some other religion, Hinduism and every other one, just using Hinduism as an example. So you have to think in terms of what other religion has an ultimate entity that is in some way similar to the ultimate entity that I know is in Hinduism. And then all you need to do is name the other religion's corresponding entity. So you will have already given me the name of Hinduism's ultimate entity. And the next thing you do, explaining it in two respects, is to give me, explain its similarity to another religion's corresponding entity. So you need to name that other religion's corresponding entity and the similarity. And please notice, ladies and gentlemen, that by the time you name another religion's corresponding entity, the similarity with another religion's corresponding entity, you will have answered two things. You will have answered one for Hinduism and one for that other religion as well. And so you are killing two birds with one stone in doing that. And then the other thing that you need to explain to me, the second respect, is we're using Hinduism here, its fundamental character, the ultimate entity of Hinduism, its fundamental character. And you can simply use one of these three pairs of categories. Does it have an ultimate entity which you know to be personal or impersonal? One, not both of those. Eternal or not eternal? One, not both of those. Or present in some things or present in all things? One, not both of those. And any of those three pairs you may address, or to put it another way, out of those three pairs, you need to answer only one out of the 6 items that are possible in there. So, to review, you give me the name of the ultimate entity, what that ultimate entity goes by. In other words, not the terms God or spirit or ultimate entity, but rather the name for it, in a complete sentence, of course, and in another complete sentence, probably rather than part of the same one, the similarity that another religion's entity has to the one in Hinduism. And then the third thing for Hinduism is its ultimate entity properly considered personal or impersonal, or is it properly considered eternal or not? Or is it properly considered present in all things or present in only some things? That's what you tell me about Hinduism. Then you go to Buddhism, and they don't have to be in this order, of course. I will keep track of that if you have to skip around. Buddhism, the same thing, the ultimate entity and similarity to another religion, a religion's ultimate entity, and then it's the fundamental character of that entity. and then Taoism or Confucianism. It does not have to be both. And then Shinto, and then Judaism, and then Christianity, and then Islam. So that's question one. Now let's go to number two. Number two reads, and it's the one that is the different kind of question from the other four. And so it's going to count a different amount for each part of the question that you answer, and I'll explain the number, the amount that each counts in a moment. The question, though, every religion except Hinduism and Shinto has a founding or leading figure. Give the name and title of the person for each religion. The name and title. Describe and explain the significance of an event in his life that was pivotal for the religion. If there are more than one person of major, now we go to the next page, significance for the religion, name all of the let's see, name all of the persons, and then focus on one. Now I'm going to go back to page one and take this a little bit at a time. Please notice that since Hinduism and Shinto have no founding or leading figure, that means that you no longer have 7 religions to deal with. You have only 5. The 5 simply exclude Hinduism and Shinto. So, if you have 5 religions counting 5 points apiece, this is the way the number system works on it, how much each counts. If you have 5 religions counting 25 total, then each religion counts 5 points apiece rather than 3.5 for the 7 religion system. 5 points apiece, okay? Then it says, give the name and title of the person for each religion. The name and title consist of 2 items. The title is different from the name, and you must include both for each religion. So each one of them is going to, so we have 2 items there that you need to answer for each of the 5 religions. And then it says describe and explain. That's 2 questions there. Describe and explain the significance of an event. What I mean by describe and explain the significance is this. Describe means you tell me what the incident, what the event was in the founder or leader's life. And then explain the significance of means you tell me what difference that made in the person's ministry or in the religion. Why was that important? So you have 2 more things that you're going to tell me there. So then the next thing says if there are more than one person of major, now I go to page 2 again, significance for the religion, name all of the important people and then focus on one. Name all the important people. You don't need to give me their title, however, only their name. So I will just tell you that in at least one of the religions, there is more than one person who is either the founder or a very important person within that religion. When you come to that one or more religion, what I need for you to tell me is the name of all of the important figures, and it's only 2. I will tell you that much. It's only 2 figures where there is such a religion or religions, if there's more than one, there are two people that are considered very important. What you need to tell me for those two figures are the name in both of their cases and their names, and then you need to focus on one of them, telling me the title, what that figure goes by in that religion, and then an event was important, uh, what the event was, and how it was important in that person's life for the religion. Now that's kind of complicated, and so you might want to pause this and rerun it and listen to me again on that if you wish. So that's what you need to do for number 2. But let me add something for number 2. What I told you is that there were 4 items to answer for each one of the religions except for the religion or religions that have more than one founder or leading figure. So for the religions that only have one founder or leading figure, then you're going to have 4 items to answer for me that count 5 points total. Therefore, that religion will have, for each item that you answer, each item will count 1 1/4, because 1 1/4 times 4 equals the 5 points for that religion. However, for the religion or religions that has a founder, 2 or more founders or leading figures, and there is at least one of them, there you will have 5 items in that religion or religions, and those 5 items that total a total of 5 points value will therefore count 1 point apiece rather than 1 1/4 points apiece. You may not be very concerned about how that all works out in such detail as I am, but I want you to know in case you are concerned, because I'm sort of a numbers person. So that gives you question 2. Now we go to questions 3, 4, and 5. And in question 3, and remember in question 2 to do that in complete sentences, though you may use bullets also. In question 3, it has to do with the sacred texts within each religion. And it reads, each religion has one, and by the way, the numbers for the page numbers in Negocian for question 2 are there, and you'll notice that there is none for Hinduism and Shinto because there is no leader or founder to include in that question. Number 3, we're back to answering this for all 7 religions now. Every religion has one or more important texts. Name one of those important texts for each religion and explain what is important about it for practicing the religion. And then, to the extent possible, and I'll explain the importance of that little phrase in a moment, specify how important the text is in comparison to important texts in other religions. So here we go. Name one important text, sacred text for each religion. One important text. There's a lot of texts in every religion, and I'm asking you to name one of them. What I would recommend in your preparing for this question is that you look over religion by religion, one at a time. What is the text in here that fits 2 qualifications that I can remember the easiest, And secondly, that I can make sure I spell correctly. Remember the easiest and spell correctly. You can find these in the notes, but you can also find them in Negocian in the pages given to you there. And so that is the way that I would pick a text. Now let's go. So that's one of the things you need to answer for me out of 3 things for each text. The second one starts with the word explain. Explain what is important about it for practicing the religion. Why does the religion consider it a sacred text? There are different reasons that the religion considers various texts as sacred. And so you tell me what you can about why it is important for the religion. How do people use it for the religion? What is it? What is its value for the practicer of that religion? And then the to the extent possible sentence. Specify how important the text is in comparison to important texts in other religions. Now here, folks, what I want you to do, I'll explain the to the extent possible in a moment. What I want you to do is I want you to rank your text in comparison to the sacred texts of the other religions. You don't have to name those other sacred texts, just rank it. Is this text more important for its religion than the text in any other religion? Or is it one that is important, but it's really not as important as the ones that you find in other religions? And the way that you can answer this, and it's not an easy thing to answer, is to try to remember what notes you took religion by religion at this point, and whether I said this is the sacred texts in this religion are very important, or the sacred texts in the religion are not as important as they are in this other religion or religions, or these sacred texts are considered sacred, but they're not very important for practicing the religion. Those are the kinds of things that you need to try to remember from the class time we had together, and in particular, how I address the sacred texts in every religion. And I would give you one more comment on this little phrase, to the extent possible. This is not something that is very clear, and so how you answer whether the text is important or not, because I didn't say it equally clearly in the case of every religion, but I want you to try to have this is a subjective judgment on your part. I want you to try to have a sense of how important this text was as far as you remember it. And I will try to get, and you can justify that for me with some comments if you wish. And I will give you some credit if you give me that information. And if you don't give me any information on it, I will not give you credit, but I will give you some credit for trying, you might say. And so that's what is meant by to the extent possible. Please remember that to the extent possible only involves 1 1/6 or 1 1/7 points per religion. And so it's doesn't count anymore. It's not a big high value item, just as nothing is high value in itself. So that's number 3, the texts. So we come to number 4. Every religion includes an approach to observance and devotion. Determine a main approach in each religion and describe the approach and relate it to similar ones in other religions. Okay. Now, this is a question that you need to be careful to answer in a careful way in the following sense. First of all, observance and devotion. Every religion has an approach to observance and devotion. The first thing I use those two terms to ask you to think about how it is that practitioners of a religion practice their religion. How do they worship? How do they pray? Do they have pilgrimages? I'm actually giving you some answers there, at least in a general way. And what kind of motions do they have in their religion? So observance and devotion are kind of flexible terms. Let me say one more thing about them. What observance and devotion does not mean, and be very careful about this, is what does the religion believe? What are their main beliefs? I don't want beliefs. I want to know what they do and how they show their devotion. So, I want you to determine a main approach in each religion, one by one, all 7 religions. And then, let's go to the next page again. Describe the approach and relate it to similar ones in other religions. Determine a main approach is item number 1 that you need to do. Now, I'll just tell you that every religion includes in some way praying. They have prayer in their religion. And so what I will allow you to do, but limit you in another sense, is I will only allow you to use prayer as a main approach that you want to specify for the religion, because it can be any of these religions. So I'm kind of giving you an answer to 2 of the religions here, 2 of your choosing. But I want you to tell me, to use the concept of prayer, the practice of prayer, only in 2 of these religions. The other 5, you must use something else besides prayer as a main approach to observance or devotion in that religion. Something besides prayer. But, so having clarified that, let's go a little farther. The main approach that you're going to, is one thing you're going to tell me. And then you're going to describe that approach. And what is meant by describe is you're going to tell me how they do it. And how they do it in one religion is almost always going to be different from how they do that same practice in another religion. So that's what I mean by describe the approach. And then thirdly, relate it to similar approaches to similar observances and devotions in other religions. So I'm not saying relate it to similar beliefs. I'm saying relate it to similar observances or practices or devotional practices in other religions. So you find some similarities between very different kinds of religions in certain respects. And I believe that that is all that I want to tell you about that one. And let me just remind you that you must choose a different kind of main approach to observance and devotion than prayer in 5 of the religions, though you may use the notion of prayer for 2 of the religions. And I've also noted to you that every religion can legitimately be found, and you can find this in Negocian in the pages specified, found to practice prayer in some way for its practice. So that's number 4. Then we come to number 5. And 5 is about violence and pacifism within every religion. Some of the religions have a tendency toward violence and others toward pacifism, nonviolence. I want you to group the religions accordingly. Is it a violence-oriented religion or a pacifist-oriented religion? And discuss the nature of the tendency. What kind of violence do they practice? What kind of pacifism do they practice in each group? For the violent group, indicate the similarities among the religions and distinctive features. So the violent religions will be similarly violent in certain ways, but they will be differently violent in other ways from the other religions. For the pacifist religions, similarly, indicate their similarities and differences from one another. Now, folks, this suggests that, and you can arrange it this way if you wish, this is where you do not need the same kind of essay form that I have asked for in the other religions, in the other questions. Here you may do it in 2 columns. The column on one side is the violent religions, and you list them. The column on the other side, the pacifist religions, and you list them. Put violence at the top and pacifism at the top of the other one, and then answer the questions for them. And we'll get to those in a moment. But there is a third way that may occur to you that is possible to do this, and that is, we're talking about religions that have histories of 1,500 years to 3,000 years. And so some of them, some of the times, any given religion, some of the time is has some violent periods and some pacifist periods. And for those, you can have a third column, you might say down the middle of the page, in between, if you wish. Or you can put them, since you're going to be typing, and I don't make columns very well, you can make them violent, group 1, and then under that you can put violent sometimes and pacifist sometimes, and then under that you can put the ones that are pacifist most of the time or all of the time. Now this also is a judgment call for you, because there are religions that are primarily pacifist, and there are those that are primarily violent, and you should put those accordingly. But you may find in your review of the religions that you find within their historical development, and that's the place to find this answer, that some of the times they were violent and some of the times they were pacifist. And in a case like that, you can just label them either violent or pacifist, but you can also label them sometimes violent, sometimes pacifist, that third category that is kind of between the violent category and the nonviolent or pacifist category. So now let's talk about the things that you need to tell me about each one of these religions. First of all, after you group the religions accordingly, that's what we've been talking about so far, discuss the nature of the tendency in each group. And for the, tell me what kind of violence they are involved in. And then the next sentence, for the violent group, indicate the similarities among the religions. Religion A is similar to religion C in its violence, or A and C are similar in their pacifism, but also tell me their distinctive features. So tell me that A and C and maybe E, and I'm not specifying any particular ones here, I'm just pulling letters out of the air. A and C and maybe E are distinctive from one another in the following ways also. And so do that for the violent ones, for the pacifist ones. And then if you have that third category, which I kind of recommend and think you would find it helpful, of partly violent and partly pacifist, then proceed with the similarities and differences between religions that fall into that in-between category as well. Well, folks, that is the review. I hope it is helpful for you, and I want you to feel free to email me if you wish, and I'll try to be very careful to watch for email questions from you on the Wednesday and the Thursday of the day preceding the final exam and the day of the final exam. That would be April 29 and 30. So there we have it. Good luck to you all.